You're not antisocial. You're not depressed. You're not even avoiding people. Not exactly. You just got home from work on a Friday, sat down on the couch, looked at the group chat lighting up with plans for tonight, and thought, nah. Not because anything's wrong, because everything about right here feels right. And then you felt a tiny flicker of guilt about it. Like, maybe you should want to go. Like, maybe something broke inside you at some point, and you didn't notice. I'm Frank, and if that sounds familiar, stay with me for a minute. Because there's actually a name for what's happening to you, and it's not what you think. Here's where most people start this conversation. They say, you're an introvert. They say, you were always this way, and you're just now admitting it. And sure, maybe that's part of it, but that's the easy answer. The real answer is weirder, and it starts with your brain. There's a chemical in your head called dopamine. You've heard of it. It's the one everybody calls the feel-good hormone, which is close enough. Dopamine is the reason you once wanted to try new restaurants, meet new people, drive to a party across town on a Tuesday just because someone said it might be fun. It's the reward system. It's the thing that makes your brain say, that sounds exciting, let's go. Here's the problem. Dopamine doesn't stay the same your whole life. It drops, naturally. Starting right around middle age, your brain produces less of it. A study out of University College London found that this decline directly affects how willing people are to chase rewards and take risks. Not because they become scared, because the chemical motivation for seeking something new literally decreases. Your brain is producing less of the stuff that once made going out feel worth the effort. And a 2023 study from Shan University Medical College took it even further. They looked at the dopaminergic neurons in the part of the brain responsible for novelty-seeking, the VTA and SNC regions. What they found was that as these neurons slow down with age, curiosity drops. The desire to seek out new social and environmental experiences declines. And this isn't a personality flaw, it's a biological process. The mice in the study showed the same pattern. Less dopamine activity, less interest in new things, across species. So when you're sitting on that couch and the idea of getting dressed and going to a crowded bar sounds like a punishment, that's not laziness talking. That's your brain, doing exactly what aging brains do. Downshifting. Not breaking down, adjusting. But it's not just chemistry. There's a psychological layer sitting right on top of it. Stanford psychologist Laura Carstensen spent years developing something called Socioemotional selectivity theory. Fancy name, simple idea. As people get older and start to sense that their time isn't infinite, they become pickier about who they spend it with. Not in a cold way, in a protective way. The brain starts filtering. It says, I don't need 20 acquaintances. I need 3 people who actually know me. And what happens is kind of beautiful if you think about it. You stop collecting friends and start curating them. You stop saying yes to every dinner and start saying yes to the ones where you'll actually laugh. Carstensen's research found that older adults will proactively drop peripheral social partners from their networks, not because they're lonely, but because they're optimizing. They're running a tighter operation. Fewer people, more meaning. Now you're 47, or 52, or 59. And the idea of spending a Saturday night with your partner on the couch watching something you've both already seen twice sounds like the best plan anyone has ever made. That's not withdrawal. That's your brain and your psychology lining up perfectly for maybe the first time in your life and saying, this is enough. I've been working on something on the side, a book called Psychology of Gen X. It covers a lot of the things I couldn't fit into a single video, like how your parents' generation wired you for certain habits and what those habits look like now. It's in the description if you want to check it out. Now let's talk about something a little more interesting, because the science explains the mechanism, but it doesn't explain why this generation, your generation, took to it so naturally. Why the transition from social butterfly to homebody felt less like a loss. And more like coming home, literally. Think about what you already knew how to do before any of this kicked in. You already knew how to be alone. You'd been doing it since you were 8 years old. Developmental psychologist Peter Gray published a major review in the Journal of Pediatrics in 2023, looking at what happens when kids grow up with large amounts of unsupervised time. What he found was a direct link between independent childhood experience and something called personal agency, the internal belief that you can handle things on your own. And as that kind of independent time disappeared from childhood over the decades, so did that sense of agency in young people. The two lines tracked almost perfectly. But your generation? You had more of that unsupervised time than almost anyone. You came home. Nobody was there. You made yourself something to eat. You figured out your afternoon. You handled your own boredom, your own fear, your own entertainment. And all of that trained something into you that no app, no program, no parenting style has been able to replicate since. A tolerance for solitude that feels comfortable rather than threatening. That's why the pandemic didn't wreck you the way it wrecked other groups. A 2025 Harris poll found that only 31% of Gen X rated the pandemic as a highly impactful life event, compared to 45% of Gen Z. That's not because it didn't matter. It's because the core lifestyle adjustment, stay home, figure it out, entertain yourself, was already something you've been practicing since childhood. The world told everybody to go inside and sit there, and your generation said, okay, we know how to do this. You didn't have to learn how to be at home. You had to learn how to leave. And here's where it gets layered. Because that comfort with home didn't just survive into adulthood, it evolved. It got better. The kid eating cereal alone in front of the TV at 4 p.m. turned into the adult with a house they actually like, a kitchen they picked out, a couch they saved for, a backyard they maintain, a streaming account with 6 watch lists, a coffee setup that costs more than their first car payment. There was a report a few years ago that said the characteristic Gen X midlife crisis isn't buying a sports car, it's building a dream kitchen. And that landed because it's true. Your generation doesn't run from middle age. You nest into it. You upgrade the home. You invest inward. The house isn't where you crash between adventures. The house is the adventure. Futurist Faith Popcorn called this cocooning back in the 1990s. She described it as the impulse to go inside when the outside world gets too rough, to pull a shell of safety around yourself. She predicted it would reshape how people live, work, shop, even eat, and she was right about all of it. By 2017, she'd upgraded the concept to something she called bunkering, an even more intense retreat into the home, driven by world events, mass shootings, economic instability, and digital overload. The world kept getting louder, and more people responded by going quieter. But here's what Popcorn didn't fully explain. For most people, cocooning was a response to fear or fatigue. For your generation, it was also a return. The house was already familiar territory. You didn't retreat to your home because the world scared you. You came back to the place where you first learned you could handle anything. You came back to the couch where you figured out who you were before anybody else bothered to ask. And that's the part nobody talks about. The reason you love staying home isn't one thing. It's 3 things stacked on top of each other. Biology is pulling you inward. Less dopamine, less novelty-seeking, a brain that's calibrating toward calm. Psychology is narrowing your focus. Fewer people, deeper connections, no interest in surface-level socializing. And history trained you for all of it before you even had a word for it. You didn't become a homebody, you were built for it. Slowly, over decades, from the inside out. I wrote something I've been meaning to write for a while. A short book called Psychology of Gen X. It traces the things you do today back to the rooms and the people that built those habits into you. If that sounds interesting, links in the description. Here's the thing people get wrong. They see you canceling Friday plans and assume you're struggling. They see you skipping the work happy hour and think you're checked out. They hear you say, I'd rather just stay home, and read it as sad. But what does that evening actually look like? You're on the couch, maybe your partner's there, maybe your dog, maybe it's just you. There's something on the TV that you chose. The house smells the way you want it to smell. Nobody needs anything from you for the next 3 hours. Your phone is across the room. You're not bored. You're not lonely. You're not scrolling to fill a gap. You're just there, present, in a room you built, on a night you chose, living a life that finally matches the pace your brain has been asking for. That's not isolation. That's alignment. And alignment looks different at different ages. At 25, alignment meant being in the right room at the right party. At 45, alignment means not being in any room you didn't choose. There's a word psychologists use for this shift: intrinsic maturation. It means your personality is naturally settling into a more balanced version of itself. The extroverted parts quiet down. The parts that needed novelty and stimulation don't scream as loud. You don't stop being yourself. You just stop performing the version of yourself that other people expected. Susan Cain, who wrote the book on introversion, literally, has said that even she noticed this change. She was always introverted, but she described her social needs in high school as intense. She talked on the phone for hours. She craved connection constantly. And then, over the years, that dial turned down, not off, just down. She described researching and writing alone as her favorite activities, the same things she once thought she couldn't handle. That's maturation. That's your brain settling into the frequency it was always tuned to, once the noise of ambition and social expectation stopped drowning it out. And for your generation, that signal was always there. It was there when you sat on the floor of an empty house at 9 years old and realized quiet wasn't something to fear. It was there when you figured out that being alone and being lonely are completely different things. It was there every time someone asked, "Don't you want to get out more?" And something inside you answered, quietly, "Not really." That answer used to make you feel broken. Now, it just makes you honest. The world is louder than it's ever been. There are more notifications, more events, more invitations, more pressure to show up and participate and post about it after. And most of the people giving that advice are younger than you and still running on the dopamine your brain started tapering off 10 years ago. You don't owe anyone a performance. You don't owe anyone a reason for staying home. And you definitely don't owe anyone an apology for enjoying it. Your home isn't a hiding place. It's the headquarters. It's the place you chose, with the things you earned, for the life you finally stopped pretending you didn't want. 40 years ago, somebody handed you a key and said, "Figure it out." You did. And the place you figured it out was home. Nothing's changed. You just got better at it. Quick thing before I go. Psychology of Gen X. It came out of doing this channel and realizing there was a bigger story connecting all of these topics. If you want to take a look, it's linked below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.